Welcome everyone to the Council meeting on the 12th of September 2023, which I now declare open at 6:36 p.m. I'd like to warmly welcome the members of the public joining us in the gallery this evening, as well as those joining us at home online. As well as being live streamed, the video recording of this meeting will also be available on our website, so attendees in the gallery are advised that your presence may be recorded. I also ask that mobile phones be switched to silent during the meeting, and a reminder to the public in the gallery that under Governance Rule 75.1, personal video and audio recording in the chamber of the meeting is not allowed. On behalf of Moonee Valley City Council, I respectfully acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which we're meeting, the Wurundjeri Woiwurrung people of the Kulin Nation. I pay my respects to their spirits, ancestors, elders and community members, past, present and emerging, and extend that respect to any other Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. Item 2 on the agenda is apologies and leave of absence, and Councillor Nation has advised he has an apology for this evening due to work commitments, and I've also received a request for leave of absence from Councillor Adams. So can I please have a mover and seconder that Council grant Councillor Adams a leave of absence for the period 7th to the 25th of September 2023 inclusive. Moved Councillor Bedio, seconded Councillor Byrne. I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? And that's carried unanimously. Item 3 on the agenda is the confirmation of minutes. Councillors, can I have a mover and seconder that the minutes from the council meeting held on Tuesday the 22nd of August be confirmed? Moved Councillor Sypek, seconded Councillor Bedio. I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? That is Councillor Bedio, Councillor Byrne, and that's carried unanimously. Item 4 is declarations of conflicts of interest. Does any councillor have a conflict of interest on any item of the agenda this evening? If not, we move on to presentations. Councillors, do we have any presentations tonight? Councillor Sypek.
Yes, thank you, Mr Mayor. The last time I attended an AFL match at Windy Hill was many years ago when I think it was Essendon played Hawthorn, and it was the big brawl where nearly everyone got involved, and that was always a memory that I've always had. But on Sunday, I've got to have another memory, Mr Mayor. 31 years AFL hasn't played at Windy Hill, and we had our first AFLW match there on Sunday, and Essendon won, Mr Mayor. Essendon won, and I think that was a historical game with a historical win at Windy Hill, and I look forward to seeing many, many more games of AFLW at the homeland of Essendon.
Thank you, Councillor Sypek. Are there any other councillor presentations this evening? Councillor Hodgson.
Thanks, Mayor. We'll see how I go here. On Saturday, Council had the official opening of our new Jering Flemington hub, and I just wanted to say a few words to thank all of the council staff and our community partners in the state government who partnered with us on the production of what is an incredible facility down at Debney's Park. It provides new sporting facilities, classrooms, a huge hall, recreation room, maternal child health rooms, a lounge space that will be available for private study, and really just a lounge room and a facility for everyone in Moonee Valley, in Flemington, in the housing estate down in Debney's Park to access and use. And it was so amazing to see the facility absolutely buzzing with activity on Saturday. Just a huge thanks to everyone who got that done and to everyone in the community who shared the day with us. It was an incredible day. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Hodgson. Would any other councillors like to present to Council? Councillor Isaac.
Thanks, Mayor. While we were at the new Jering Flemington Hub on Saturday, we also had the great pleasure of conducting the Spirit of Moonee Valley, the Neighbourhood Spirit Awards, sorry, they're called now, I got the name wrong. So the Neighbourhood Spirit Awards, the old, so the new name for the old Spirit of Moonee Valley Awards. And we were delighted that most of the recipients of the awards could join us at the new hub, and we could acknowledge their fine work across the municipality throughout the last 12 months. We had some really excellent candidates for this year's awards, and I'd like to just read their names now and acknowledge the varied commitments and voluntary commitments that they've made to the community over the past 12 months, well, longer probably in most cases. So the Neighbourhood Spirit Award winners for this year were Sarah Dovey, Marie Barton, Moonee Valley Sustainability, Essendon Symphony Orchestra, Jennifer Nola, Ayushi Kilan, Sainab Sheikh, Emmanuel Marmo and Brendan Davey. And it gave us great pleasure to award the Citizen of the Year to someone who's made a contribution to the municipality for over 30 years in her capacity as the manager of the Farnham Street Neighbourhood Learning Centre, and that is Kathy Connop. Kathy couldn't join us at the weekend because she's having some well-earned rest somewhere warmer, but we do congratulate Kathy on her achievement as Citizen of the Year and on her contribution to our community. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Isa. Are there any other presentations? Councillor Byrne?
Excuse me, sorry. Thank you, Mayor. On Saturday, there was a very distressing event that happened on the old Calder Highway down at Sweet Lulu's, which, whilst isn't in the city of Moonee Valley, they're our neighbours. And I was made aware on Monday that there were in fact people who reside in the city of Moonee Valley who were there at the time, including someone who was working. So I just wanted to thank everyone who was there at the time, particularly the first respondents, the staff there, all the innocent bystanders. They've been through a lot and there is support available if anyone feels that they need it. And thank you to Paul, who's the business owner, who apparently has been rallying around, and I'm sure that when they get back open that the City of Moonee Valley are right behind all small businesses, even if they're not quite in our patch. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Byrne. Are there any others? I'll just quickly acknowledge that on last Friday night I attended my old school, Buckley Park College, for its 60th anniversary, and it was really fantastic, both in my current role and as a former student, to see the fantastic work that the current staff and students are doing, but also see a lot of my old teachers and catch up on old times with old classmates as well. What was fantastic to see and be a part of is that the state government announced $2 million to start the rebuild of Buckley Park, which is well overdue, where the last work occurred about 15 years ago under the Building the Education Revolution. So thank you to Ben Carroll, Natalie Hutchins and Bill Shorten for joining me at my old school. Natalie Hutchins, the Education Minister, is also a former student, so it was particularly exciting and pleasing to be there at the special event. We now move on to item 6, petitions and joint letters. Councillors, do we have any petitions or joint letters? Item 7 is public question time, and we've received a record 19 questions this evening. The first 5 are in relation to item 9.2, 172 Ogilvy Street, Essendon. The first 2 questions are from Jennifer Gleeson, who I understand is not joining us this evening. So in Jennifer's words, as per previous objection, this design contradicts the Garden Suburban 6 neighbourhood character guidelines. Can Council advise how this new proposed 3-storey dwelling at 172 Ogilvy Street, Essendon, which is contrary to the style and character of the area, won't dominate the streetscape and upset this valued character of our neighbourhood? Thank you, Jennifer, and I'll ask our CEO, Helen Swee, to respond.
Thank you, Jennifer. Through the Mayor, the application has been assessed against the design guidelines of the Garden Suburban 6 precinct and is considered an appropriate response in the context of the site. The siting and massing are consistent with the pattern of development which has occurred in the immediate and wider area. Thank you.
Thank you, CEO. Jennifer's second question is, this proposed development in height and use of material will be extremely dominating in the street, especially with existing single-storey modest and simple in-form dwellings located next door. Neighbours will lose the aspect of spacious streets, views to distant objects and spaces, and the open feeling of our current neighbourhood. Should neighbouring properties expect that being built in and dwarfed from adjoining properties is acceptable? And I'll ask our CEO to respond.
Thank you, Jennifer. Through the Mayor. The proposed development complies with the mandatory height requirements of the general residential zone and provides sufficient setbacks from the street and the neighbouring properties to mitigate its dominance to the streetscape character. No views to the second level will be visible from Ogilvy Street. The build form, as it presents to the street, therefore, appears as a double-storey development and is comparable to other contemporary developments in the area. Side setbacks, spacing, and recessed first and second floors limit the massing of the development, while complying with relevant Res Code standards. The potential impact of the views of other dwellings is not a protected consideration in the area. Thank you.
Thank you, CEO. The next question is from Mark Spanier, who I understand is not in the gallery this evening. So in Mark's words, how do you acknowledge that there are too many households for the number of parking spaces available in 2021, and then in 2023, A, allow a subdivision in this section of the street, parentheses, literally across the road from my house, thereby creating an additional household, and B, in doing so, remove a valuable street parking space with the creation of an additional driveway? I'll ask the CEO to respond.
Thank you, Mark. Through the Mayor. The development exceeds the car parking requirements of Clause 52.6 car parking of the Moody Valley Planning Scheme, with 6 car spaces in lieu of the 4 required. Officers have recommended that a permit note be added, which will not allow any on-street parking permits provided to the occupiers of the land. Thank you.
Thank you, CEO. The next 2 questions are from Warwick Roscoe, who I understand is in the gallery. Please join us at the podium, Warwick. And please ask your question. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks for the opportunity. I own the property directly abuts the development site to the north, and we're really concerned about the overlooking onto our private open space.
Sorry, Warwick, I'll just ask you to read your question just as we have so many questions on the agenda.
Yeah, so that was just sort of an introduction to that. So has my concern and objection to the overlooking from the window of the bedroom 3 of dwelling 1 and the balcony at the rear of level 1 into my secluded private open space of 174 Ogilvy Street, has that been acted upon and resolved?
Thanks, Warwick. I'll ask Helen Swee to respond.
Thank you, Warwick. Through the Mayor. All objections were considered when assessing the planning application. Officers have recommended condition 1C be included to ensure the windows of bedroom 3 to dwelling 1 are obscured in accordance with the standard B22 of clause 55.04-6 overlooking of the Moody Valley Planning Scheme. Thank you.
Thank you. And Warwick, I'll just, because these are technical questions, I'll also say that if you do have any follow-up questions, you can ask our staff afterwards as well. But did you want to ask your next question?
Yeah, so the next question is in relation to the excavation, which will be over 2.5 metres deep, right along the northern boundary of the development. And this may result in damage to our pre-existing in-ground swimming pool and also the dwelling footings at 174 Ogilvy Street. So the question is, how will my assets be protected to prevent damage during excavation, and if damaged, who will be liable for that?
Thanks, Warwick, and ask the CEO to respond.
Thank you, Warwick. Through the Mayor. The inclusion of Condition 4 requiring a Construction Site Management Plan, CSMP, has been recommended. The provision of a CSMP is generally a requirement where significant excavation is proposed to occur. The CSMP must be submitted to and approved by Council and must detail the construction activity proposed and the site and environmental management methods to be used. Potential impact on and the protection of the adjoining properties as a result of the development will be required to be undertaken during the building stage in accordance with the requirements of the Building Act 1993. Thank you.
Thank you, Warwick, for your question. As I said, please feel free to follow up with our staff offline, and I appreciate you coming tonight. Thanks. The next 8 questions are in relation to item 9.5, which is 1 to 3 Moreland Road and 262 to 270 Pascoe Road, Essendon. The first 2 are from Anne Hillier, who I believe is in the gallery, but I understand is happy for me to read out her questions. So Anne's first question is, what provision are being made for entry and exit at 2 separate points and for open air space? And I'll ask the CEO to respond.
Thank you, Anne. Susan Mayer. Vehicular access to the site is primarily from Moreland Road, with a secondary access for service vehicles from the existing access to Pascoe Road. The overall layout of the development provides suitable spaces for outdoor recreation for future residents. Thank you.
Thank you. And the next question is, what approvals do you have from Aboriginal site inspections and environmental impacts of the development? And I'll ask the CEO to respond.
Thank you, Anne. Susan Mayer. A cultural heritage management plan has been approved by the Wurundjeri Cultural Heritage Corporation in accordance with the Aboriginal Heritage Act 2006. Thank you.
Thank you, CEO. Our next 2 questions are from former Councillor John Kavanagh, who I believe is in the gallery. Please go ahead with your first question, John. Welcome.
Thank you. Good evening. My questions concern the planning application of Lionsville site. Do you think it's an appropriate response to an incredibly sensitive interface with both the Moonee Ponds and the 5 Mile Creeks to allow an application that includes a building height of over 42 metres, only metres from the creeks?
Thank you, John. And I'll ask CEO to respond.
Thank you, John. Susan Mayer, the maximum building height of the development is not 42 metres, rather it is 20.6 metres. The setbacks from the creeks have been reviewed by officers and are considered appropriate as outlined within the officer's report. Thank you.
Thank you. And John, your next question.
Yeah. Have each of you considered all of the negative outcomes that approval of this massive overdevelopment will have on our community, including impacts of the users of walkers and cycling track, native flora, including loss of sunlight, and not simply granting approval due to the very limited aged care elements in this proposal?
Thank you, John. And the CEO to respond.
Thank you, John. Susan Mayer. The proposed development will have minimal impact upon users of the walking and cycling track, and as a result of the site's orientation, there are limited overshadowing impacts to the public realm. Thank you.
Thank you, CEO. And thank you, John. Our next 2 questions are from Darren Hartnett, who I understand is here. Welcome, Darren.
Thank you, councillors. My first question, could councillors please consider a reduction in the excessive height of the buildings proposed and increase the setback of the buildings to at least 25 metres from the site boundary along the environmentally sensitive Moonee Ponds and 5 Mile Creeks, and remove the planned overshadowing of both creeks and adjoining lands?
Thank you, Darren, and we'll ask the CEO to respond.
Thank you, Darren. Susan Mayer. As per my earlier response, the maximum building height is 20.6 metres. Additionally, there is no overshadowing to 5 Mile Creeks, as it is located to the north of the subject site. While there is overshadowing of the public realm in the afternoon, this is limited to a section of the shared path. A setback of at least 25 meters as suggested is considered excessive and would not be an efficient use of the land. Thank you.
Thank you, CEO. And Darren, your second question.
Could you please, in your deliberations, consider the negative impacts of this huge overdevelopment, which contains only limited aged care, on this environmentally sensitive Moonee Ponds Creek shared trail, the two creeks, the native flora and fauna, the adjoining areas of 1 and 2 storey homes, and the limited parking on site and access that the application proposes?
Thank you, Darren. And the CEO to respond.
Thank you, Darren. Through the Mayor. Council's officer report explores these issues in detail, and the information provided will inform Council's decision this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, CEO, and thank you, Darren. The next two questions are from Frank Sotil. Is Frank here? Welcome, Frank.
Thank you. Yes, my two questions are, why is this large development located in a residential area, mostly under heritage restrictions, allowed to proceed with reduced car parking numbers?
Thank you. And the CEO to respond.
I'll continue that question, please.
Ask both questions?
Well,
Sure.
it's the same question. There will be 273 additional residences added in the proposal development and only 254 new permanent car parking spaces.
Sorry, Frank. I don't think that's part of your question that was submitted, just because, as I said, we have a lot of questions to get through tonight.
I have it written here as a submission of what I submitted.
It's a preamble.
So we've we've got two questions from you submitted.
Yes.
If it was part of a preamble or a discussion point, we're just going off the questions. However, officers have considered your full submission in their response.
Okay, well, I'll summarise the whole situation then by saying the new development has
Sorry,
only...
Frank, sorry. We just have to go off the question. It's in question time. So I'll ask the CEO to respond to your question, which is, why is this large development located in a residential area, mostly under heritage restrictions, allowed to proceed with reduced car parking numbers? Okay. And I'll ask the CEO to respond.
Thank you, Frank. Through the Mayor. The subject site is not located within a heritage overlay and is set back from any properties within the heritage overlay. The proposed uses of the site are appropriate within the general residential zone and promote intergenerational integration within an existing residential area. The proposed car parking reduction is minimal, with the reduction of only 1 car space. Thank you.
Thank you, CEO. And Frank, the second question I've got here from yourself is about encroachment and setback. Have you got that one ready?
Can I read the full question?
Yes.
Okay, I didn't read the previous full question, so I'll have a go at this one. Why are council allowing the encroachment of the development with 4 to 5 storey heights of 13 to 16 metre buildings within 2.4 metres of the site to the boundary parkland and within 5 metres of the site to to Moreland Road? Could council or planning department explain how this is reasonable and acceptable where any current domestic dwelling requires a minimum 6 metre setback from its boundary to a street frontage and a 300mm increase in setback for any 1 metre above 3 metre height to the side boundary?
Thank you, Frank. And we'll ask the CEO to respond to that.
Thank you, Frank. Through the Mayor. The proposed setbacks and overall building heights are considered to be an acceptable design response for the location and generally consistent with the previously approved layout for the site under planning permit MV/21230/2010. Thank you.
Thank you, CEO, and thank you, Frank, for your questions. The next question is from Brian Duggan, who I believe is joining us this evening. No, Brian's not here, so I'll read his question in his words. Were the MVCC councillors aware that the LXRP was conducting site inspections and feasibility studies for removing the level crossings at Buckley and Park Streets, and will MVCC request the individual site report, feasibility study and cabinet submission documents regarding level crossing removals for these sites from LXRP? And I'll ask our CEO to respond.
Thank you, Brian. Through the Mayor. Council is not aware of any recent site investigations or feasibility studies conducted by the Level Crossing Removal Authority into the potential removal of the existing level crossings at Buckley Street and Park Street in Moonee Ponds. We thank you for bringing this to our attention, and the Council will continue to request that LXRP release any available information to the public in a timely manner. Thank you.
Thank you, CEO. The next two questions are from Luke Mowat, who I understand is not here this evening. Luke's first question is, what is the Council doing to inform residents about the imminent decision by the federal government on Melbourne Airport's third runway proposal? And I'll ask the CEO to respond.
Thank you, Luke. Through the Mayor. Council resolved in May last year to provide a response to the Melbourne Airport Master Plan. The decision and submission are available on Council's website. The report to Council recommended that Council not support the master plan due to risks associated with the potential health impacts. The Commonwealth Government has not yet announced a decision on a third runway. Thank you.
Thank you, CEO. And Luke's second question is, what is Council's position on the third runway, and what would the Council do to protect the residents from the potential harm caused by the additional noise and air pollution due to increased air traffic? And I'll ask the CEO to respond.
Thank you, Luke. Through the Mayor. The submission that Council provided on the Melbourne Airport Master Plan made clear that the potential impact on human health should be considered as part of the preparation of the master plan or proposals for a third runway. Council suggested that Melbourne Airport commission an independent air quality assessment of the existing and expected emissions from airport activities. Although the 2022 master plan was approved, it does not imply approval of the third runway. Council can therefore not anticipate the outcome of that decision, which rests with the Commonwealth. If the third runway is approved, Council will consider its next steps. Thank you.
Thank you, CEO. The next two questions are from Peter Robinson, who is not joining us, and in Peter's words, can we clarify the Council's position on the Voice referendum? Are the councillors supporting the Voice, or is MVCC supporting the Voice? And how was this decision reached? Was there a survey or opinion poll done with ratepayers and residents? And I'll ask the CEO to respond.
Thank you, Peter. On 31st January 2023, Council unanimously endorsed to support an alteration to the Australian Constitution that establishes the principle of an Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander voice to Parliament. On 6th of June, Council endorsed a communications approach that provides reputable information supporting efforts for constitutional change on the upcoming referendum, so the community can make an informed decision. Council's support for the Voice to Parliament aligns with Council's endorsed reconciliation plan, Buckaroo-Jering, which highlights the importance of self-determination of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples. Thank you.
Thank you, CEO. And the next question from Peter is, which councillors are involved in the IBAC investigation? And I'll ask the CEO to respond.
Thank you, Peter. Through the Mayor, Council has been made aware of a current IBAC investigation. It would not be appropriate for Council to make further comment at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, CEO. And the last question is from Sheila Sexton, who is joining us this evening, I believe. Thank you, Sheila. Please join us at the podium. Welcome, Sheila.
Thank you, Mayor. Just got to get this back. Sorry. It's decided not to come up for me now.
That's all right. We've got a copy of your question here if you'd like it.
My question is in relation to the permit application MV 5542022. When I attended the council consultation meeting on the 15th of March this year with the Mayor and Jennifer Kemp, we were informed that we would hear back from the council within 6 weeks. After not hearing from the council for over 2 months, on the 18th of the 5th, Mr Ian Wormald, a fellow resident of Haldane Road, contacted Jennifer Kemp for an update.
Sorry, Sheila. Sorry, I might just ask you to just jump to the question. So the sentence starting, several residents, including myself, if that's all right, just to ask the question.
Sorry?
So just to, in terms of not including the preamble in the interest of time, but that has been factored in by officers in their response, but just your question starting, several residents, including myself, have contacted the planning department multiple times. If you just wanted to ask that part of your question.
Yes, that was what this was all leading up to, as to why we'd had so many residents put in queries as to why we hadn't heard. And I had rung on the 2nd of June.
Sorry, Sheila, I'm going to have to ask you to ask your question.
So you just want me to go down to my
just to
question
yes.
is, as it is nearly 6 months since I attended the council consultation meeting on the 15th of March, and I or my fellow residents have not received any notification of amendments to the original application, why has council not formalised their decision not to approve the application?
Thank you, Sheila.
Fine.
Thank you for that.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you,
and
Council.
I'm sorry about the formatting there. I appreciate your patience. I'll ask the CEO to respond.
Thank you, Sheila. Through the Mayor, Council is awaiting amended plans from the applicant that address significant issues identified in the design. The redocumentation will require input from various expert disciplines. Council has communicated with the applicant and expects a response, including amended plans before the end of September, which would then need to be assessed. If amended plans are not submitted, Council will take an appropriate decision on the available plans. Thank you.
Thank you. Sheila, can I just get a nod or a shake of the head whether you heard that okay over there? That's all right. I might ask one of our staff to follow up with you just to give you that answer in writing. Thank you. That comes to the end of public questions, and we now move on to item 9, reports. And item 9.1 is 109 Buckley Street, Moonee Ponds, parentheses Lot 1 on plan of subdivision 052423, construction of a multi-storey building and a reduction in car parking requirements. Councillors, do I have a motion? Councillor Isa.
Thanks, Mayor. I'd like to move an alternative motion, please.
Yep.
That
What's your
reads
motion?
that Council resolves to issue a notice of decision to refuse to grant a permit in relation to planning permit application number MV/860/2022 at 109 Buckley Street, Moonee Ponds, in brackets Lot 1 on plan of subdivision 052423, close brackets, for construction of a mixed-use building and a reduction in car parking requirements, subject to the following grounds. 1, the proposal fails to meet the following design standards contained within clause 52.06, in brackets car parking, of the Moonee Valley Planning Scheme. A, design standard 2, hyphen car parking spaces. B, design standard 5, hyphen urban design. 2, the proposal fails to satisfy the standard contained within clause 58, in brackets apartment developments, close brackets, of the Moonee Valley Planning Scheme, and does not achieve an acceptable outcome in terms of the following objectives. A, clause 58.02, hyphen 1, urban design. B, clause 58.02-5, integration with the street. C, clause 58.03-6, access. And D, clause 58.03-7, parking location. The proposed development is an overdevelopment of the land.
Thank you, Councillor Isa. Is there a seconder? Councillor Hodgson. Councillor Isa, would you like to speak to your motion?
Thanks, Mayor. Look, this is an interesting application because it's in a commercial one area adjacent to public transport, an intensive public transport area. So I can understand why officers have suggested that to solve a problem whereby the car parking creates a real urban design issue, they've suggested removing the car parking completely. I'm just not satisfied with that proposal. This is a very small site. It's 201 square metres, and it proposes 4 dwellings. It's a 5-storey building, 4 apartments, and then a retail area, and 4 car parks to accommodate the 4 dwellings. I'm not too fussed that it's only 4 car parks, not 7. That's not so much of an issue, but I think my concern, and what was possibly shared by the 34 objectors who made objections to this application, is that what we then get along the side street is essentially a garage, which knocks out all of the permit car parking along there and creates an unsatisfactory urban design outcome. In fact, the officers did comment in response to their assessment of this application that the overall parking arrangement was not supported. It creates an unacceptable streetscape outcome. So as I say, this situation where there's the dominance of the garage, not considered to be responsive to the planning scheme standards, in an effort to enhance and activate the street front there, officers suggested getting rid of all the car parking. I just don't think that solution works for this particular site. I think ultimately we've got sort of an overdevelopment of a very small site. And look, Councillor Sythek has a fondness for bringing food analogies to planning applications, and they can often be quite useful in explaining sort of the reaction to planning applications. So I'm going to borrow his template and try a food analogy for this one, which is it's to me, it's like you've got a burger, but you can't fit the meat in the burger because the bun's too small. So you're going to make it a veggie burger. And he's looking at me as though he's never heard these food analogies before. Councillor Sythek, it's borrowing your planning arguments. The result here is that we've got a veggie burger that's not intended to be a veggie burger. No one wants it to be a veggie burger, and it's because the meat can't fit. So that's primarily the issue with this application, and hence the refusal. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Isa. Councillor Hodgson, would you like to speak to the motion?
Thanks, Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Ben. And thank you, Councillor Isa. Look, it's one of those sites that, I think we've reflected that if it weren't such a small and skinny piece of land, that, we might be able to activate that Buckley Street commercial and retail precinct a little bit better. But with the shape and the size of the land and what's in front of us, I concur with Councillor Isa's view that it's just not quite the right application for a good outcome in the area. And I think that, as has been detailed, in an effort to solve one problem, the officers have, in my view, created a new one, and it's one of the things that the objectors did have concerns about, a reduction in car parking spaces. This is a further reduction, down to 0. And I do understand that, with the dwellings being so close to both the bus station hub and the train station, there is a chance that the residents of those apartments wouldn't have cars, but I think that there's a pretty decent reality that they would have cars, and they would contribute to what is a growing concern about parking availability on street in that area, given the number of apartment buildings going up around there. Just in this instance and the application in front of us, I do hope that something happens with the site, because at the moment it's just a 1-storey, and it does actually have that where the garage doors are proposed is actually a crossover at the moment. So potentially a development of the site could rectify that and improve the urban design and the street frontage there. But this just is not the application that I'd like to see on that piece of land, so I'm supporting the refusal. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Hodgson. Would any other councillor like to speak? Councillor Bedio.
Thanks, Mayor. To use your analogy, Councillor Isa, I really think the meat fits in this application. For me, this location, this space is so close to Essendon train station. It's close to the commercial elements of Rose Street. It's close to the bus depot that's at Essendon station. In reality, if we're looking for a diversity of housing, a diversity for our housing market and apartments with no car parking, this is the space to do it. I wouldn't consider this to be an overdevelopment, and I think this goes some way in having these additional 4 apartments, goes some way into alleviating the housing crisis that we're currently in at the moment. I can understand the concerns around car parking, but the reality is I have a lot of friends who live in other parts of Melbourne who don't have cars, who are just fine not having a car, and I think these apartments would be suitable to someone like that. So I'm happy to support this application, so I'll foreshadow that if this motion is to fail, that I'll move the officer's recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Bedio. Would any other councillor like to speak? Councillor Sypek.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Using the food analogy as well, I don't see this as a hamburger or a veggie burger. I actually see this as a hot dog, or with a nice long lean bratwurst with a bit of sauerkraut running through it. No leaning over the side. And I think, and look, I can see both sides of the argument here. I can see Councillor Bedio's argument about diverse housing, about being in the right location, being that it will create housing. It could be 4 new rental properties in the area. That would be fantastic. There is a crisis. But then I can also see what Councillor Isa is saying. And to me, this is a real 50-50. Which way do you go? Do you support the housing crisis, or do you support, it could be inappropriate. But you're near public transport. I mean, you're so close to public transport, you don't even have to walk. You can just virtually hop, skip and jump, and you're at the train station. So it's got cons and pros on both sides. So I've thought about it, and I've decided I think the housing crisis is a lot more imperative right now at this stage in society than slightly inappropriate design. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Sypek. Would any other councillor like to speak? Councillor Byrne.
I like veggie burgers, just putting that out there. It was interesting, when I was hearing Councillor Isa speak, I was like, yep, I'm going to refuse this. And then when I heard Councillor Bedio speak, I thought, oh, actually, no, I'm not. I'll go back to my initial thoughts, which is not refuse it. And so now I'm really looking forward to Councillor Isa's debate at the end. So I'm still very much like Councillor Sypek, which is somewhere in the middle. I suppose you're not going to get a much better spot than basically right on top of Essendon Station to put something like this. It's very well serviced with transport. Obviously, we're from the other end where we're desperate for any type of public transport up in Rosehill Ward, whereas this particular part of Essendon, very, very well serviced. If we're ever going to get a however many stories with no parking, it probably would be here. The concern that I have with this one is that it is actually a very small piece of land. Now, that's not the applicant's fault. That's obviously what they bought. How would they consolidate land? That might not be a possibility. But I am mindful of the design outcome if we were to continue to allow sort of these 4, 5, however many stories on 200 square blocks. I don't think overall as a city that necessarily is a good outcome. So I went for a good look around there today, and I do think that if there were cars associated with this, it can be a bit messy around there. And I think that if the original application was to have no parking, it may have been slightly better, whereas it, because it was now an afterthought and a thought through with the officers, which I tend to agree, it's probably not as ideal as it potentially could be. So where am I with this? I'm not sure. I think the housing crisis is an incredibly stressful situation for a lot of people. We need places for people to live. This is ideal, and I can understand that a lot of people don't have cars and aren't in the market for a car and are very happy just to live right near a station. But then, regardless of that, is this the actual right application on top of that? So looking forward to hearing Councillor Isa speak, and we'll just see where it lands. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Byrne. Councillor Sharp, you're the only councillor who hasn't spoken. Would you like to speak?
I guess I might as well, Mayor. I think it's pretty simple for me. 201 square metres with a proposal for 5-storey height, 17.8 metres. A proposal we've got coming forward tonight is 20-odd metres above ground on a 2,000 square site. So this site is absolutely tiny. 201 would have to be probably one of the smallest blocks you could obtain in this area, and to put 5 stories on it, and a mix of retail and apartments. It doesn't matter really to a degree whether it's near Essendon Station and public transport or not, because people still need cars. We're not going to get rid of cars because our public transport system actually isn't up for it. So aside from the fact that I would say that car parking is needed, you cannot also forget that, noting this is on the corner of Buckley Street, you've got Carlisle Street, which is made up of the majority of single-level houses, and they may even have a heritage overlay down there, I'm not sure, but it's a pretty intact, all those streets behind there, Carlisle and the other ones that run off that, it's a really intact part of our municipality. And yes, this would be on the edge of it per se, but you've also got the new roads created with the underpass from Buckley Street Station. It's an absolute mess up there, to be honest. So, housing crisis, yes, but who's going to want to live in a dog box? Is there any point building dog boxes? At 201 square metres, it's going to be a very, very, very tiny whatever it is. So I would be happy with the refusal, absolutely. You've got site coverage of 91% too. I know it's in a commercial zone, but still, I don't know how on such a small site, something of this scale can even be sort of contemplated, I guess. So, no, happy with the alternative.
Thank you, Councillor Sharp. Councillor Isa, you have a right of reply. Would you like to exercise it?
Thanks, Mayor, I will. Thanks very much to Councillor Sharp for bringing in issues of character, which I hadn't spoken to earlier, and certainly was one of the key issues that was raised at the consultation meeting, and I think I was the only Murnong councillor available at that time for the consultation meeting, so was the only one to necessarily hear all of the objections that were put forward at the time. Look, one of the things in Murnong Ward is that we get a high number of complaints from people moving into home or moving into apartments where they have a vehicle and they haven't been told by the landlord that they're not eligible for a parking permit. It's a common occurrence in Murnong Ward, and there's nothing that we can do about it because our policy is very clear. It's been in place since 2007, and I don't think there's an appetite at all to change that policy. We just do not have the street space for cars to change that policy. So we do rely on developers accommodating cars of tenants. And perhaps other ward councillors don't appreciate how many times this does create an issue for Murnong, which is why, and I appreciate the arguments around housing crisis, but this where we have apartments continually being built without many car spots. We don't provide car parking permits. Carlisle Street is permit parking on one side, and then the other side is taken up with retail and commuters. So it's it's a street that's in high demand for parking. This design hasn't been, this application has not been designed with this in mind, and I thought that, I can't remember which councillor put that argument forward, but I thought it was a very good one. And it is the case that, sorry if I might just have 15 more seconds.
No, Councillor Isa. Thank you, Councillor Isa. I will put that to the vote. All those in favour? That is Councillor Byrne, Councillor Hodgson, Councillor Isa, Councillor Sharp, Councillor Tyson. All those against? Councillor Bedio, Councillor Sypek. I declare that carried. Item 9.2 is 172 Ogilvy Street, Essendon, lot 113, Block F, on plan of subdivision 003151, construction of 2 dwellings. Councillors, do I have a motion? Councillors, do I have a motion? Councillor Hodgson.
Thanks, Mayor. I'll move the officer's recommendation.
Thank you. And a seconder? Is there a seconder? Councillor Isa. Oh, Councillor Isa. Councillor Hodgson, would you like to speak to the motion?
Thanks, Mayor. Look, I wasn't expecting to really speak on this one. It's a application for construction of 2 dwellings up near Keeler Road in Essendon. So Ogilvy Street extends off Keeler Road, and this residence is close to the major activity centre and the public transport zone. So the plans, look, it's probably not my favourite development from what it looks, and I do take into account some of the objections which have been on the basis of neighbourhood character and the other, not in keeping with the other houses in the street, and in particular the flat roof structure. But in having a look and considering the officer's recommendation, I think the application is compliant with our planning scheme. It does provide 2 4-bedroom houses and ample car parking for those. And for the reasons, put forward in the officer's report, I'm happy to support the application.
Thank you, Councillor Hodgson. Councillor Isa, would you like to speak? No, thank you. Would any other councillor like to speak? Councillor Byrne.
Sorry, just playing past the baby. Look, this was a really interesting one to look at. In terms of where the area is going, we're going to be seeing more and more of these in terms of the neighbourhood character. We don't have necessarily a lot of heritage around that area, and I think that there is a market need and a market want, from what I can gather, for some of these more modern flat roof type proposals. I am mindful of the street setback objective and the walls on boundaries objective, but I don't necessarily think they're a deal breaker for me. I think there was the question at the start, which was in regards to the pool. That will absolutely be on the builder to ensure that when they build a new construction, things need to be underpinned. So I would say make sure you've got photos of the pool, and if there's any damage, well, hopefully there's no damage, but make sure it's all set up so there won't be any damage. It wouldn't necessarily be something that we would not allow a planning application to go through for the thought that there could be something that happens to a structure on the other side, because that is for them to ensure that that doesn't happen. Down this strip, there's going to be more development, and we're looking at really big blocks here. We're looking at 858 squares. Normally, in Midgery, we're at a time where there was 650 squares, and they were getting 3 on the block there. And I'm glad that they're back down to 2, and I'm glad that these 850 squares to only get 2 on a block for 850 squares, like 850 odd squares. We can these sort of things. We're going to be getting a lower quality development, potentially a lower quality development with more pushed onto the block, as opposed to these, which, like, they're big, they're monstrosity. Like, these are going to be big, and I acknowledge that. But if that's what the market needs, and this is what the applicant thinks is ideal for them, or what they're planning on selling to the market, then I think that it is a better outcome to have 2 on the block than 3 or potentially 4 in this particular area. So I will be supporting it, but I can understand why there were objections to it, and I think that the officers did well in how they've been able to condition particular things. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Byrne. Would any other councillor like to speak? Councillor Sharp.
Thank you, Mayor. Obviously, I'm the only Buckley Ward councillor here tonight, and myself and Councillor Adams took part in this consultation meeting. Look, this development, I don't think it looks bad visually. I think it's bringing a new aesthetic into the street, I guess. But it is just very big. It's very big on the block. Noting the block is large. Yes, I understand all that. But there were a lot of concerns, and there are a lot of concerns from particularly the directly abutting neighbours. And some of the side boundaries here are actually quite small. I think on the north there's only 1 metre boundary, and when you are looking at a house on the other side of the fence, when there's only a metre boundary that is very tall, it can be very, very, very imposing. So I note that the applicant put through a Section 52 application to address some of those issues. But look, Ogilvy Street, Deakin, all those streets sort of along this pocket are getting pummeled with development, and I really wish that council had the ability to say, you know, it's at capacity, because it is at capacity. And I do think we need to be mindful of that, because I tell you what, you drive down any of those streets, particularly Ogilvy in this neck of the part of it, and it's just, there's cars on the streets like 24/7, and it's ridiculous. It's very hard for the residents, and the residents that have been there 60, 70, 80 odd years, you know, it's difficult, and I can't support this application based on that fact, and based on the fact that there's just too many
Members of the
developments
gallery.
in that area, and yeah, I'd like to be able to say enough is enough, but happy to support I will be voting against. There's no refusal up, but I'll be voting against this application.
Thank you, Councillor
Thank
Sharp. Would any other councillor like to speak? Councillor Sypek.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I've had a look at this application, and it raises great concerns with me. Firstly, the overlooking that comes from this building into the neighbour's property. I really think that needs to be addressed in some kind of conditioning form. But what really worries me here is the underpinning. The neighbour has a swimming pool. Now, if you're going to compromise the foundations of a house, that's not much pressure per square inch when you've got a house. But when you've got a pool filled with water, that's a lot more pressure per square inch. And if the excavation goes slightly wrong, that could cause some serious damage. Then you get into a dispute. Oh, it was broken before, or oh no, we didn't do it, and all that. This is where it starts to get very ugly, and I don't want to see this happen in our municipality. It's happened before, and I think this one here is going to come close to this, and this is what really concerns me. So I don't really like the way it's virtually designed nearly edge to edge. The conditioning of the windows, the overlooking, I think this is just not a right fit for this property. I think there could have been better design scope here, and I think that we really should, I compel my colleagues to really have a look at this. Either we defer this and get some proper conditioning onto this, and get some proper, and really re-evaluate this before we actually look at maybe passing it. But I compel my colleagues to please, I'd like to foreshadow a deferral and to have a look at this.
Thank you, Councillor Sypek. Councillor Bedio, you're the only councillor who hasn't spoken. Would you like to speak? No? Councillor Hodgson, would you like a right of reply?
Thanks, Mayor. Look, I'll just be quick. I think just in relation to the digging down of a basement, it is, as the question was asked in public question time and response given from the officers, that is a matter for the building permit, and it has been done and it can be done, that, you know, digging out next to some footings of an adjoining property, I assume can be done safely. I've seen it, the Skinny site on Homer Street in Moonee Ponds, that butts up against a heritage site on Mount Alexander Road. They just dug out a, 3-storey basement or something, and certainly gave me cause for concern, but clearly, there's engineers that know better than I. So I think, I take the officer's answer to that public question as correct there, and agree that, that's a matter for builders to get right if the permit is approved. I think, look, I understand that it's pretty line ball, and we could debate the merits, and there's obviously pros and cons to both. But considering, I agree with Councillor Byrne that if we refuse this, there's nothing to stop 3 or 4 dwellings being put forward on a block of this size. So I think getting a few 4-bedroom homes, we often see 2 or 3-bedroom homes, and I'm happy to see some 4-bedroom homes. I think it suits, the demographic of those in Essendon, and I'm happy to support it.
Thank you, Councillor Hodgson. I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? That is Councillor Byrne, Councillor Bedio, Councillor Hodgson, Councillor Isa. All those against? Councillor Sharp, Councillor Sypek, Councillor Tyson. I declare that carried. We now move on to item 9.3, 13 South Street, Ascot Vale, Lot 1 on Title Plan 834889G, demolition of a fence and outbuilding, partial demolition of the existing dwelling, construction of alterations and additions including fencing, external painting, and the construction of 2 dwellings to the rear of an existing dwelling in a heritage overlay area, parentheses H021. Councillors, do I have a motion? Councillor Isaac.
Mayor, I'd like to move an alternative that just includes a new point F that reads, the first floor hallway window to have a permanently fixed external screen or obscure glazing to at least 1.7 metres above finished floor level and be no more than 25% transparent. And then there might need to be some re-numbering after that.
And subsequent re-lettering?
Yep.
Yep. Thank you. Is there a seconder? Councillor Hodgson. Councillor Isa, would you like to speak to your motion?
Thank you. Look, this is a real success story, I think, in terms of an applicant being willing to listen to objectors' feedback and responding to that in a way that I think meets the bulk of the objections that were put forward. The situation here is that there's quite a lovely house, although it's quite run down, in a contributory home in a heritage overlay area in Ascot Vale. And the application is to retain the front part of that and to have a renovation out the back, but then put 2 extra dwellings on the back that then front onto, I think it's Wigton Street, I think. And objections were mainly around the character of the way that those 2 rear dwellings presented to the street. And I was very sympathetic to those objections, because I think that the applicant, in trying to meet that requirement that we have at council under the planning scheme, where new dwellings aren't meant to mimic heritage design, had created something quite modern, but it in fact was quite jarring in terms of the streetscape. So at the consultation meeting, objectors spoke very passionately about retaining the character of the streetscape, and the applicant was very, very willing to respond to that and has put forward an amended application that was advertised. although no objections were removed, and I'm sure that some objectors are still not sure about the intensification of the use of the site with the additional 2 dwellings, I really do think that the amended plans do respond to the character and the streetscape. And I do thank the Heritage Advisor at Council for being open to some new designs, which I think the words used were quite useful actually, because there's often this quandary that applicants have put in terms of, well, do I need to build something that's design something that's modern so that it doesn't mimic heritage? But what they've managed to do here is, and these are the words used in the report, that the proposed architecture follows traditional design topology, which includes a gable roof form at ground level, hip roofing at the first level, and the render. And while the architecture is traditional, it doesn't include the use of historic elements such as chimneys or fretwork. And so the Heritage Advisor was willing to support it. And I think that's a really useful distinction that maybe some future applicants can make use of, and I'll leave it there. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Isa. Councillor Hodgson, would you like to speak?
Look, I think Councillor Isa's covered all the main points on this one, and I'm happy to support the application. I think, you know, it's great to see the outcomes of our consultation meetings result in some changes that might address the key concerns. I have just noticed that, you know, it might create a street numbering issue of the residences that are facing Wigton. Unfortunately, it's at the end where they start with number 1, so I'm sure we'll get some information from officers about potential need to address the new residential addresses facing that street, but that will come down the track, I'm sure. So happy to support this one.
Thank you, Councillor Hodgson. And I was picking up some feedback from your microphone, so maybe just if you use the left one from now on, if that's okay. Would any other councillor like to speak? If not, I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? And that's carried unanimously. Item 9.4 is 47 Fisher Parade, Ascot Vale, parentheses Lot 1 on Title Plan 59993K, construction of 2 dwellings in a significant landscape overlay, SLO4, design and development overlay, DDO1 and DDO2, incorporated plan overlay, IPO, and alter access in a transport road zone. Councillors, do I have a motion? Councillor Isa.
Move the officer's recommendation. Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you. And a seconder? Councillor Bedio. Councillor Isa, would you like to speak to the motion?
This is another really interesting application. This particular piece of land has been the subject of applications in the not too far or not too distant past. The difficulty for the applications along Fisher Parade is the existence of the public acquisition overlay, and the previous application that came to the chamber encroached onto the overlay. It was passed by council, but ultimately at VCAT it was overturned, and VCAT stipulated that there not be an encroachment on the public acquisition overlay area. So the applicant has gone back and put forward another application, which, while I think there's a very minor encroachment, it doesn't comply with the requirement to be well set back from the public parkland. And although it's currently not public parkland, the PAO operates in a planning sense that it's future or potential parkland. So the officers have included a condition that the building be set back 4 metres from that. Now that 4 metres comes from, in fact the requirement is 5 metres, but it's a discretionary requirement. VCAT's decision in 2018 was that it be more than a trifling 1 to 2 metres. So I think that the officers have made a reasonable decision that 4 metres provides an adequate buffer there. And I'm happy to agree with the officers on this one. I do note that the landscape architect, the arborist, the strategic planner, property and assets department all had feedback that's all been incorporated into the conditions of the permit. I note that this particular application has very strong views on both sides. There are people who feel very strongly that there should be no requirement to set back from the boundary of the overlay, and people who feel that the 5 metres should be complied with. I think sometimes our job at council, and the previous application was a good example of this, sometimes our job at council is to find the mediated compromise, because while both sides can try to dig their heels in and stick to the letter of the law, that the side that they think should be met. I think in this case, if we go with the 4 metres, it could avoid a costly and a lengthy argument at VCAT. So I would suggest that compromise has been reached, taking into consideration all of the different views, and I think it's a good outcome. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Isa. Councillor Bedio.
Thanks, Mayor. Look, not much further to add other than I agree wholeheartedly with Councillor Isa. I'm supportive of the officer's recommendation. I'm not overly thrilled with it necessarily. However, we're going off precedence in regards to what the VCAT has previously said in relation to the PAO and encroachment on the PAO. Do I think it's fair? No, I don't. I do really feel for some property owners along Fisher Parade in relation to the PAO. However, I find it's interesting the PAO has been around since 1954, I believe. So it's been around for quite a long time. But I do really feel for the owners in Fisher Parade and the restrictions that PAO places on their land and their inability to develop on parts of their land. So, but I do agree with Councillor Isa. I think this mediated outcome is the best outcome in respect to what we have seen at VCAT and what we know to be precedents on the sites. So I'm happy to support the officer's recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Bedio. Would any other councillor like to speak? Councillor Byrne.
Thanks, Mayor. For me, this one, I feel like it's landed where it needed to land. I possibly would have been more supportive of the 5 metres, but then I feel like we have to trust our planners on this one that 4 is the appropriate amount. It's one of those ones that could actually end up in VCAT for either way, really, because people don't want to go to 4 or because they want it to go to 5. So it probably means we're about where we need to be. This PAO has been coming up regularly through council, not only this application but other ones. So it will be interesting to see that if it does go to the next level, whether 4 metres from that boundary is adequate or not. I will note that these are still very, very big dwellings. We're not talking about small things that have had to be squeezed onto a small bit of land. We're talking, 5 bedrooms and pools and stuff. So, we're not. I think that there is room for the applicant to be able to decrease the dwelling and still have a beautiful homes in Moonee Valley for people to live. So thank you to everybody who's worked incredibly hard to condition a application. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Byrne. Would any other councillor like to speak? In that case, I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? And that's carried unanimously. At this point, I'll take a quick 5-minute break for everyone to refresh themselves. So we'll return at 7:55. Welcome back to the council meeting, returning at 7:59. Our next item is item 9.5, 1 to 3 Moreland Road and 262 to 270 Pascoe Road, Essendon. Use of the land as a retirement village, buildings and works for a retirement village and residential aged care facility. Reduction in car parking requirements, removal of native vegetation in the significant landscape overlay schedule 2, and alteration to access to a road in the transport zone 2. Councillors, do I have a motion? Councillor Sharp.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to move an alternative, if I may.
Yes, what is your alternative?
The council resolves to issue a notice of decision to grant a permit in relation to planning permit application number MV269-2022 at 1 to 3 Moreland Road and 262 to 270 Pascoe Road, Essendon, land in PC 174252B, Lot 1 on PS 503047U, Crown Allotment 2007, Lot 1 on PS 342702H and Crown Allotment 2029 for the use of the land as a retirement village, buildings and works for a retirement village and residential aged care facility, reduction in car parking requirements, removal of native vegetation in the significant landscape overlay Schedule 2, and alterations to access to a road in the Transport Zone 2 in accordance with the following conditions. Endorsement conditions before the use and development starts. Amended plans to the satisfaction of the responsible authority must be submitted to and approved by the responsible authority. The amended plans must be drawn to scale with dimensions and be in an electronic format. The amended plans must be generally in accordance with the plans submitted pursuant to Section 57A, dated 16 May 2023, but modified to show A, buildings B01C, B01D, B02A and B02B to be reduced in height by 1 level. B, the buildings to be set back a minimum of 5 metres from the northern boundary. C, the provision of 1 additional car space for a total of 264 spaces on site. D, removal of the words or similar from within the materials and finishes schedule. E, deletion of the signage noted on the front fence. F, all surrounding site context, including all services, street trees, etc., shown on the site entry and services plan. G, all pedestrian paths throughout the site to have a minimum width of 2 metres. H, dimensions and locations of all bicycle parking spaces constructed in accordance with the relevant Australian standard. I, grades of the proposed vehicle crossing and the initial internal roadway are to be shown on the plan and designed in accordance with the relevant Australian standards. J, all dwellings and balconies treated-screened to prevent overlooking into the habitable room windows and private open space of other dwellings in the development within a horizontal distance of 9 metres, with details clearly shown on all relevant floor and elevation plans. K, the provision of 300mm trench grates at the bottom of basement ramps. L, all stormwater treatment measures and associated annotations as a result of condition 3. M, all SMP-BESS annotations and measures in accordance with condition 4. N, an amended landscape plan in accordance with condition 6. O, any changes arising from the public works plan in accordance with condition 9. And P, any design modifications as a result of conditions 16 to 19. When approved, these plans will be endorsed and will form part of this permit, and the rest remains the same.
Thank you, Councillor Sharp, and I'll just ask governance to scroll up on the screen. So, Councillor Sharp, can I clarify that your motion is the same as the one distributed in the pack for proposed motion 9.5 with the additions of A, B and C? Is that correct?
In the pack, C is noted in another section, but yes, the highlighted bits have been included in that
Thank you. Can I just ask councillors if they're familiar with what's been moved? Just a general nod or shake of the head. Councillor Bedio? Yep. Councillor Isa, Councillor Sypek? Yep. Great, thank you. Is there a seconder? Is there a seconder? Councillor Hodgson. Councillor Sharp, would you like to speak to your motion?
Thank you, Mayor. This is Buckley Ward and I'm the only one here tonight, so here I am flying the flag. Obviously this site is massive. It is 22,000 square metres, so it is huge. It has always been the beloved site of Lionsville. That has now all changed and it is now a completely vacant block and you can really see the size of it when you go past. This application relates to a retirement village and residential aged care facility to be built on that site by Ryman Healthcare. Now there's been a lot of iterations and applications and various works over the years on this site, but obviously tonight we are looking at, I guess, the final application. And for me, well, I figure we've got two options. We could refuse this as an application in its entirety, potentially, but it would obviously go to VCAT. We could put up amendments as I have moved tonight to at least, if it does go to VCAT, guide VCAT in what council would potentially prefer to see on this site, or we could approve it. My motion is obviously to put up some amendments, and I thank Councillor Isa for working on those amendments also today. But the fact that, well, I guess for me, I would prefer for VCAT to actually see what council would prefer to see on this site, and any reduction in height of those buildings more along the north face where the sensitive creek is, and obviously the buildings to be set back minimum 5 metres from that said interface, I think would be incredibly important. Look, I think we all understand that aged care and retirement villages are needed and wanted, particularly in our municipality, because we do have an ageing population. But it's a very, very, very big site. It's a very, very big development. So I'm very cautious as well, even moving these amendments, because either way, it is going to be a very large construction that is going to look completely and utterly different from what Lionsville ever looked. Lionsville was single story everywhere and you know, certainly not the density at all that this site is proposing. So my amendment does propose to reduce the heights in certain buildings, but I have made a point of saying that the 264 car spaces are still required, because either way, everyone's going to be having visitors, and I don't think that car parking, if it might be extra, will ever go astray, especially not there. So, look, I've got concerns about just traffic going in and out of this site with the amount of people that it will be servicing and things like that. But it's not really a consideration of the application.
1 minute remaining, Councillor Sharp.
I can leave it there. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Sharp. Councillor Hodgson.
Thanks, Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Sharp and Councillor Isa. Look, as Councillor Sharp's mentioned, this one is it's a difficult one, and there's obviously a lot of interest in it from the community because it abuts a sensitive landscape. And we are very keenly aware of all that, and thank you all for your interest in this decision and your feedback and questions. I note that the site is on a Crown Grant land, our report indicates, which includes a condition on title that the land used solely for provision of accommodation and services for the elderly. So I hope I'm reading the room right, that, you know, we are very glad to see an aged care facility being proposed on the site. The retirement living, the amendment that Councillor Sharp's put forward for the 4 buildings to be reduced in height, those are the buildings that will house the retirement living and not the aged care beds, which we all, I think, around the table, if I'm reading the room right, as I say, would love to see the number of beds increased. And for the size of the site, you know, it'd be great to see a larger aged care facility, but there is a mix on the site, and I think it's appropriate that those buildings that are along the sensitive interface of the creeks are reduced in height so that they're not quite as bulky. As Councillor Sharp's also said, you know, we anticipate this one is probably going to go to VCAT, and given that the use of the land is appropriate and a lot of the application is compliant, I would anticipate that, you know, a refusal would not necessarily be upheld by VCAT. So I'm glad to see that we, as council, one of our roles is to try and get outcomes for the community that address the concerns and are also, you know, addressing the need for housing and other things in compliance with our planning scheme and our strategic vision for the city. So the amendments put forward seek to give an indication to VCAT of what might be an appropriate compromise and what might be a more sensitive use of the land given the creek and the public park land. I'd love to, you know, it's a great location for people who are moving into their older years to be able to access that creek. I think, you know, it's generally a good use of the land, but I do agree that the bulk of those buildings that are along the creek, and particularly the ones with a far too close setback of only 2.4 metres from the northern boundary, I think that's definitely a condition that we'd love to see upheld. So happy to support this amended notice of decision.
Thank you, Councillor Hodgson. Would any other councillor like to speak? Councillor Bedio.
Thanks, Mayor. I'd like to move an amendment.
What's your amendment?
To delete condition 1C.
And subsequent relettering?
Subsequent relettering.
Thank you. Are councillors aware of what's been moved? I'll read it out for those who can't see the screen. 1C is the provision of 1 additional car space for a total of 264 spaces on site. Is the amendment for deletion with subsequent re-lettering. Is there a seconder? Councillor Byrne. Councillor Bedio, would you like to speak to your amendment?
Thanks, Mayor. I will, through you. Plainly, it doesn't make sense that we would be specifying that the site is to provide 264 car spaces if we're deleting whole floors from the development. It would significantly alter the car parking requirements under 5206. So for that reason, I don't think we should have a condition to specify 264 car spaces.
Thank you, Councillor Bedio. Councillor Byrne?
I agree with Councillor Bedio. This one wouldn't stack up. I'm also mindful I would want it to be compliant with what is required. And if one of the main issues that I've heard is people want it to be a greener space, and if we're filling it up like a concrete jungle with more car parks that aren't required, then that's probably not what I've been hearing. I'm also mindful that with a lot of these applications there ends up being future secondary consents and whatnot, and it'd be interesting to know whether some of the extra space that would be taken up by these extra car spaces ended up being there in 10 years' time anyway and what they would be turning into. So I think that if A and B were to get up, then we can't really have C.
Thank you, Councillor Byrne. Would any other councillor like to speak on the amendment? No? In that case, I'll put that amendment of deletion of C and subsequent relettering to the vote. All those in favour? And that is Councillor Bedio, Byrne, Hodgson, Isa. Those against? Councillors Sharp, Sypek, Tyson. I declare that amendment carried to form part of the substantive motion. We now return to the substantive motion. Councillor Bedio, were you just moving an amendment or did you want to speak to the...
Just moving an amendment, Mayor.
Thank you. Would any other councillor like to speak to the report? Councillor Isa.
Thanks. Look, this is a really difficult one for all of the reasons that residents spoke to in asking questions and in their emails to us over many months. The sensitivity of the creek has been, and the landscape area has been a key concern on this one. And I was just reading through the conditions again that the officers have put in their recommendation that are part of this motion, and officers have worked very hard to incorporate into the conditions protections and measures around the waterway and the habitat and the landscape. Look, I've really been in two minds all week as to what to do about this particular application. On the one hand, you know, we can refuse it, and no doubt it would go off to VCAT, and there would you know, be subject to some great scrutiny there. On the other hand, as Councillor Sharp and Councillor Hodgson have spoken to, we can sort of try to identify what issues it is that we have as a council with the proposal that's been put forward, to give some indication of the things that concern us most, and that's, I think, what these particular amendments are doing here. It's that setback from the northern boundary that's really problematic, and it does vary from 2 metres to 12 metres, I think, but it's really at that point where I've got considerable concerns, and I think in really flagging that for VCAT, because I'm assuming this is going to VCAT, I perhaps shouldn't make that assumption, but that is a key concern there. The height, look, I probably would have liked it reduced by more than just one level, which is why I'm still, you know, a little bit on the fence about what to actually, how to actually vote. But one level's a start in terms of reducing the view from the public land and the waterway. I don't like the design. I don't think it's attractive. But as is often said around the chamber, we're not the style police here. We're making sure that things comply with the planning scheme. I hope those particular amendments give some guidance to debates going forward. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Isa. Would any other councillor like to speak? Councillor Sypek.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Yes, I too concur that this will most likely end up in VCAT, no matter what the decision is tonight. But let's look at this holistically. If we go to VCAT and we go to a position where we've already shown our hands about what conditions we want, well, all that means is we start at a lower level. Is that where we want to start, or do we want to start where the conditions are a lot higher and negotiate down to this, not down even further? And look, that's just one aspect, but my biggest concern is the actual creek and the riparian zone of the creek. When construction starts here, imagine all the debris, all the dust, all the sawdust, the plaster dust, the concrete. Where's that going to go? It's going to go straight into the creek, and there is absolutely no protection when construction starts there. That's what concerns me. How do we avoid that? Are we going to monitor this? What we need here is monitors. What we need here is we need to make sure that when the construction starts, that everything gets, all the dust gets watered down, or it gets removed from the site straight away, not to pile up into big heaps. It has to be removed straight away. There must need to be a removal plan here, not only a construction plan, but a removal plan to minimise the impact on the creek, minimise the damage to the riparian zone. That's where we've got to start.
Thank you, Councillor Sypek. Councillors Byrne and Bedio, I have you as not having spoken. Would you like to speak?
Sure. My background is working in the age and disability sector, which I have in Moonee Valley for over a decade now. And the thing that I hear from my clients and people who I work with time after time is that there is nowhere for them to go when they leave their home. And if they are, they might be themselves, they're with a partner, when they're empty nesters, they really do want somewhere to go. And in Moonee Valley, we're basically at capacity in terms of where people can go. Trying to get into any of our retirement villages or into aged care is near on impossible with wait lists, and it can be a real struggle, not only for the people themselves, but their family trying to get them in somewhere. So I do think from the majority of Moonee Valley residents that I speak to anyway, a lot of people who aren't necessarily directly impacted by this application would actually want this to go ahead. We have an ageing population in Moonee Valley. If you have a look at the census, we've got about 10% of our population that are over the age of 75, and that's compared to 7.5% compared to the state and national average. So we do have a lot of ageing people in Moonee Valley who want to potentially, whilst it's great to age in place, at one point in time there's a lot of people who would choose to go into a facility like this. It's in a beautiful part of the world. Everyone loves, well, I think everyone loves Moonee Ponds Creek, and a development like this will allow a lot more people to be able to use it. What a great way to, what a great place to be able to retire, to be able to go down onto the creek. And mindful that the points A and points B, it is a little bit hard to tell. It's going to be somewhere between 25 and 40 dwellings, is the advice that we've received by reducing the levels of those. If that ends up being the compromise, it will be interesting, because it could be like the previous application we spoke about, that it could actually potentially go to VCAT from either side. Is this the right place to land? Potentially. I think that we need more aged care and residential places in Moonee Valley. But in saying that, I am mindful, as Councillor Sypek mentioned, of what the impact this will have on the creek. Development will be, I think it's going to be very, very difficult. But again, that's something that needs to be monitored. I've got no doubt that it will be closely looked at by a lot of people if this is to go ahead. And I really do hope, and I urge that if this goes ahead, that the applicant does everything that they can to ensure that our pristine creek stays that way.
Councillor Byrne, your time has expired.
Sorry, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Bedio, would you like to speak?
Thanks, Mayor. Look, I'll be brief. Look, firstly, I don't think there's much merit in discussing what may or may not happen in VCAT. We are a decision-making body here at Council, and we need to make decisions based on the information that's provided to us, and that should be our priority. But secondly, I completely concur with Councillor Byrne. You know, I've spoken to a number of people across the municipality who have the same struggles. They have parents, or they themselves are struggling to age in place or age in their own home, and they want to stay in the city. They want to stay in the city of Moonee Valley to grow old, and that is a growing challenge because of the limited number of places in aged care and retirement homes. And so for me, this is a really easy decision. We have a piece of unkept land. The reality is, unfortunately, it's not going to stay open space. It's private land. It's going to be developed. What do we want to see this site developed as? I would love to see this site developed for the benefit of our elderly community who we cherish and value so much here in Moonee Valley. So I'm happy to support this application, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Bedio. As there's been some dissent, I'll ask Councillor Sharp whether she would like a right of reply.
Thank you, Mayor. Well, just as a note, the buildings to be reduced in height aren't part of the aged care aspect. I think all councillors are on board with needing and wanting more aged care within our municipality because it is desperately lacking. Noting the diverse views around those two alternatives and what may or may not happen, I think for me this is just the best course of action to take to be able to put forward a case for what we would prefer to see should this progress, and definitely it is going to progress, as Councillor Bedio said, so we need to be able to make sure that we're getting the best outcome for our wider residents in our municipality and for those residents particularly who are going to reside at this location as well. So hopefully councillors are happy with those amendments put forward tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sharp. I'll put that alternative to the vote. All those in favour? That is Councillor Bedio, Councillor Byrne, Hodgson, Isa, Sharp, Tyson. All those against? Councillor Sypek. I declare that carried. We now move on to item 9.6, Endorse Draft Disability Action Plan 2024/2025, parentheses, community consultation. Councillors, do I have a motion? Councillor Bedio.
I move the officer's recommendation, Mayor.
Thank you. And a seconder? Councillor Isa. Councillor Bedio.
Thanks, Mayor. Sorry, let me just get my notes. In accordance with the Victorian Disability Act 2006, all local governments are required to develop a disability action plan, commonly referred to as the DAP. The purpose of the DAP is to encourage, recognise and promote our active commitment to eliminating disability discrimination across all the council's infrastructure and services within the municipality. And it does this by identifying key actions to implement over the period starting January 2024 through to December 2025 in support of this commitment. The DAP is a really large and important body of work and something that I'm particularly passionate about and follow closely across our annual reporting. Hopefully, if this gets endorsed tonight, I'd encourage everyone to get online and have a read of the draft DAP. And I'll quickly highlight some what I think is really exciting and important points that are included in this draft DAP. So 1.1, progress and upgrade of accessible parking spaces across the municipality. 1.5, which is a massive body of work, and that stemmed out of a notice of motion that I brought to council about maybe about 2 years ago now, and that's to continue to review council facilities in relation to their compliance with the current Australian standards current Australian standards access to premises under the Disability Discrimination Act and principles of universal access, and this is what council are calling the accessibility audit. So essentially, council officers are going around to all council infrastructure and facilities and doing an audit of these facilities for compliance on DDA, which is a massive body of work, and I really thank officers for doing the due diligence with that body of work, because I know just how big that is. 1.8, commence a capital renewal program for tactile ground surface indicators. 1.10, installation of automatic doors with sensor access to existing accessible change rooms at Ascot Vale Leisure Centre. 1.12, conduct a feasibility study into a new all-access playground in the municipality. So as we can see, it's quite a wide gamut of things included in the DAP, and I'd encourage everyone to get online should this be endorsed, this draft plan get endorsed, to get online and have a read and provide your feedback and comments. I'd like to thank the officers for all your hard work in putting together this important document.
Thank you, Councillor Bedio. Councillor Isa? No. Would any other councillor like to speak? If not, I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? And that's carried unanimously. Item 9.7 is award contract Riverside Golf and Sports Centre Management and Operations (parentheses negotiation number 100001). Councillors, do I have a motion? Councillor Isa.
I'd like to move the officer's recommendation with a change to point B, which I hope governance has received by email.
Yes, that's on the screen,
Right.
I believe.
I might just read point B if that's okay.
Yep.
Authorise the Chief Executive Officer or the Delegate Director Strategy and Planning to execute all relevant contract documents relating to Riverside Golf and Sports Centre Management and Operations, then in brackets negotiation number 100,001, close brackets, on behalf of Council with the following additions, subject to legal advice for inclusion in the contract. Point 1, a 5-year timeline to be specified in the development agreement. And point 2, setting out of arrangements regarding any business interruptions resulting from future flooding, from any future flooding of the Maribyrnong.
Of the Maribyrnong River, did you say, Councillor Isa?
The Maribyrnong River.
Thank you. And that's all, so for point A to remain the same, is that correct? It's just an amended point B?
Yeah, I believe so.
Yep.
Yep.
Thank you. Are councillors aware of what's been moved? Yep. Is there a seconder? Councillor Hodgson. Councillor Isa.
Thank you. Look, when this first came to the Chamber in August 2021, I in fact didn't support the process of moving to a contract on to an outsourced contract on this. That I wanted to see what we could perhaps do in-house. 2 years on, it's perhaps not very constructive to maintain that position now, despite any misgivings that I might have about moving to a sort of a for-profit model with respect to the operation. I mean, it's not moving to, it has been under the golf course, and other elements have been under a contract, but we're expanding that and doing it slightly differently now under this new contract. Look, I'm a bit nervous about some elements of this contract. I'll be very upfront about that. I'm nervous about its length of 20 years and the reliance that we're putting on the investment in capital works to resolve the conflicting issues between the driving range and the netball and tennis courts. I'm nervous about there needing to be profit made out of this facility in order to both fund the capital works program, which has to occur in the first 5 years, and then to repay council its licence fee of $6 million over the 17 or 16 years after the first 3 years of a licence fee the council pays to the contractor. So, I don't come at this decision lightly. Having read through the contract, having read through the report, having quizzed poor officers for a good hour before the meeting to try to make sure that there's no stone unturned on this, I'm comfortable that we have included in the contract sufficient ways for council to demand the performance that we expect, both in terms of the KPIs, the service delivery, the capital works, the staffing, the adherence to or laws with respect to staffing. The reason for the additional stipulations there are that I wasn't entirely convinced that the way the wording was in the contract necessitated that the development agreement be completed after 5 years. I just wasn't happy with the wording there, and so hence that point one. And point two is that also the wording doesn't seem to quite cover with great clarity what would take place in the event of, well, to be, blunt, likely repeat of flooding of the Maribyrnong. So just asking officers to please seek some legal advice and include some additional measures on both of those. We can't afford as a council the $10 million of capital works that's required to resolve the conflict that's been left to us by the previous council term between the driving range and the netball and tennis courts. But the last thing I want to do is load up future councils with a contract that they're struggling to get a good performance outcomes on. I really do take very seriously our job as a council right now to put in place a contract that is going to resolve this issue going forward and that is going to make this precinct a tremendous one for our community. Council retains a number of powers over this. We still set all the fees, we still set the licences for the sports club, we still have management and some responsibilities with respect to the asset renewal and maintenance and the irrigation of the golf course, which I noted. So I hope we've got the balance right here. I've been as rigorous as I can on this one, and I hope it's all going to be okay.
Thank you, Councillor Isa. Councillor Hodgson.
Thank you, Mayor. Look, I'm in a very similar position to Councillor Isa, where back when we were discussing the future of Riverside Golf Course, I was supportive of looking into the options for bringing it in-house. It does make me nervous to endorse entering such a long-term contract, but there are a few things that, there's quite a few things that differ from the previous long-term lease arrangement on this site, which by the end of the lease, as we all know and the community knows, led to not great outcomes for that asset. That's the very least of it. I think this new contract is not a lease arrangement where we're completely hands off. It's a partnership arrangement where council will be very involved and the contractor will need to report to us on service delivery and making sure maintenance of assets and KPIs, and that we're all happy with the situation. So whilst it's a very long term lease, I think that I'm comfortable that it differs from the previous arrangement, and that there are ways that we can manage not getting into that situation again. I note that Bluefit have been managing the site for a couple of years, and as the report outlines, that the clubs that use that facility have been working really well with Bluefit as the operators. That gives me confidence as well, and it's really important to us, or to me, and I again think I'm reading the room, that the community clubs that operate out of that site maintain right of access and are supported to thrive down at that site, and that's the golf club, the tennis club, the netball clubs. That's all really imperative, and the driving range enthusiasts will also see a little bit of love from this, from the investment that the contractor is able to make. So whilst I do have some hesitations like Councillor Isa, I can see that for the future of this asset, at least looking at the way that council is and isn't able to invest in capital works for our assets, I think this is a partnership that we need to test out and monitor closely and hope for the best.
Thank you, Councillor Hodgson. Would any other councillor like to speak? Councillor Bedio.
Thanks, Mayor. Look, I'm supportive of this motion. I think there's been some really good pickups from Councillor Isa and Councillor Hodgson through discussions with officers, and I think that these amendments make sense. But I'm really approaching this award of contract as an exciting moment for Moonee Valley. The golf course is, and it's been touted as the crown in Moonee Valley from a number of people. And I have to agree, Riverside is a fantastic facility, but it does need a lot of work and it does need a lot of investment. And unfortunately, that's not investment that we are in a position to be able to make at this point. So this is perhaps one of the first public-private partnerships that Moonee Valley has undertaken. And I think potentially one of the first public-private partnerships of any golf course and council in Australia. So I think it is really exciting, and a capital investment of over $10.785 million is significant. And what that will deliver is brand new mini golf facilities, new golf driving range facilities, including safety netting, new golf driving range technology, which is really exciting. That's something that we've seen in a lot of other golf courses that I have residents saying we desperately need in Moonee Valley. That's something that I think is really exciting. New outdoor spaces, including landscaping works and upgrades to the outdoor hospitality area. So this is a massive investment for Riverside, and I think it's a really exciting and great outcome for our city. So I'm happy to support this, and I'm really excited to see what the next 5 years brings from Bluefit. Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Bedio. Would any other councillor like to speak? Councillor Byrne.
Thanks, Mayor. I am very nervous about this. I'm not necessarily nervous about the next 5 years. I'm nervous about the following 15. I understand that to be able to secure significant investment in a project like this, it needs to be a long-term contract. However, my experience from council is that long-term contracts haven't, towards the end of them, they're often less than ideal, and there's been community feedback in that sort of sense. I highly doubt that I'll be on council in 20 years' time, but I've been on council at the end of contracts, and I know what it sort of feels like. It's Councillor Sypek, you can let us know, because I'm looking forward to see what you bring to the debate. I have full faith in the team at Moonee Valley to be able to work a contract now, but teams change and things, it's just very difficult, and it's a really hard time in the world at the moment. Financially, it's a hard time at council, it's a hard time for big investors. There's just a lot going on, and would it be wiser of council to look more short-term whilst there's this potential recession that's hitting, and then when everyone's more excited to invest again, then we could look at doing something like this again. Look, it's a really difficult one. This has been a very drawn-out process, and I can tell that there would be people who just want something to go on there, and I get that as well, but 20 years is a long time, and I just have some hesitations, and I think that I'll listen to Councillor Sypek's thoughts on long-term contracts if you're going to speak on it, Councillor Sypek. That at this stage, it's probably a bit too long for what I can see as the benefit. But in saying that, the other thing that I wanted to mention was that a lot of this work was done prior to the floods. So not this final step, but obviously earlier, because it's been going on for a while, so the landscape has significantly changed. But I'll look forward to hearing other people speak on this one, and regardless of what happens, I'm looking forward to heading down there at some point. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Byrne. Would any other councillor like to speak? If not, I will ask Councillor Isa whether she would like a right of reply.
Look, Thanks very much. Appreciate the caution, and I guess that's the decision that was pretty much made 2 years ago. Was the majority of councillors decided to take this path, and I was in the minority at that time. I didn't necessarily think this was the path that I wanted to go down, but we're here now, and so I guess I'll probably be pretty disappointed if there's a view that having voted to take this path, now that we're actually confronted with the reality of that, which is signing off on a 20-year contract, where we're loading up a future council with some with this, that people then might feel that it's a bit scary and a bit too hard, because that decision was made 2 years ago. So, look, I've done my absolute best to make sure that this 20-year contract is as good as it can be. We've got there are many opportunities for council to say the performance isn't good enough over not just the first 5 years, but the subsequent 15 years. So, look, I hope that all councillors appreciate that we're here now, and if we don't support this contract on the 30th of September, there's no one operating our pristine, prime, wonderful facility at Riverside. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Isa. I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? That is Councillor Bedio, Councillor Hodgson, Councillor Isa, Councillor Sharp. All those against? Councillor Byrne, Councillor Sypek. I declare that carried. Oh, sorry, and Councillor Tyson against. I declare that carried. We now move on to item 9.8, 2022/23 Q4 Council expenses. Councillors, do I have a motion? Councillor Sypek.
Happy to move the officer's recommendation, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. And a seconder? Councillor Bedio. Councillor Sypek, would you like to speak?
Look, I think this is very self-explanatory, and we do this reporting every single quartile. So I don't think I need to elaborate too much on it, as it is council expenses, and I think it's self-explanatory.
Sure. Councillor Bedio, would you like to speak? Thank you. Would any other councillor like to speak? If not, I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? And that's carried unanimously. We now move on to item 10, notices of motion, and we have two on the agenda this evening from Councillors Sypek and Byrne. Item 10.1, I call on Councillor Sypek to present his notice of motion titled Notice of Motion number 2023/29, Italian Community of Keilor Association, ICA Club.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Take notice that at the meeting of Council, it is my intention to move that Council resolves to request the CEO to present a report at a future Council meeting in 2003 detailing the results of a review undertaken with Council legal powers under the lease of the operation of the ICA Club facility located at 7 to 11 Keilor Park Drive. Well, that should be actually Keilor East, but East Keilor will suffice. The report should aim to provide the current and historical operational performance of the ICA Club's contribution to the community in accordance with the current agreement for the past 5-year period, detailing at a minimum the following: any changes in administration and membership, minutes of the annual general meeting undertaken and actions arising, financial position in relation to the payments of rental fees, municipal rates, charges, and detailing any fees payable or outstanding. 4. Operational performance detailing the number of past and current community events, meetings, club meetings, and the application and acceptance of new members. 5. The status of the current legal dispute relating to the leadership and the management of this club and plan for resolution. In the event the above information is not made available to Council within the required timeframe, the report should include what legal obligations and avenues council has as landlords to ensure the facility and its operation is providing for the expected community services for the local Italian community in accordance with the historical intent of this agreement, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Sypek. Just to, I believe you misspoke in the first sentence, just the year again. Was that 2023?
Yes, I did. Yeah.
Yes, thank you. And governance, I'll just ask for a few corrections. In item 5, it was the status. The status is what Councillor Sypek read out. There was also, thank you, in the 4th line up the top, clubs should have an apostrophe, I believe, thank you. Thank you. Is there a seconder? Councillor Byrne. Councillor Sypek.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This club, and historically, if you look at it, this was under a 172 agreement. It was Crown land given to 2 communities. One was to the Italian community, one was to the Greek community. And the Greek community hall ended up defaulting, and it's now become a childcare centre that council own. And look, as much as it wasn't a favourable outcome for the Greek community, but it was an outcome for the community. But what we've got here, Mr. Mayor, is we had a beautiful club here that I remember going to Father's Day celebrations there, Mother's Day celebrations there. There were dinner dances for the elderly, and we talked about aged care before. Well, this was an avenue where elderly people got together, enjoyed themselves, enjoyed each other's companies, and they actually felt alive. This place has now got derelict cars, rubbish all over the place. Nobody knows who's running this place. And the Italian community, I have been inundated with phone calls saying, what's going on there, Mr. Mayor? And that's why I brought this notice to motion, this notice of motion. It has not been used for what its historical intent was, for the support of the Italian elderly community. I have been contacted by elderly Italian people saying that their applications, when they put them in, were refused. They cannot join the ICA Club. They've been lifelong members. I think I've got one here, Mr. Frank de Blasio, OAM, a lifelong member. Are you a member, Mr. de Blasio? You are. You are.
Councillor Sypek.
But there are a lot of them who haven't gone to that point to become members. And this is where the problem lies. We need a report. We need to know exactly what's going on here. And the Italian community needs the support of Moonee Valley, because right now this is actually in court. Elderly people fighting for their right to use their hall. Elderly people now have to go to Sunshine to meet up, not Moonee Valley. How embarrassing is that? That's embarrassing. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Sypek. Councillor Byrne.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Sypek. Look, we don't take lightly ever in this council chamber to come in and review particular leases like this. Normally when we hand over the keys, there's a lot of trust that goes into what goes on, and so to have a notice of motion like this before us has obviously been It's been a time coming. It's not like there's been a couple of little whispers. There was a couple of little whispers quite a while ago, and things have obviously gained traction. And it's come to the point now where, as a council, I feel like we do have a responsibility just to ensure that we're getting all of the facts, figures, everything that we need to know in front of us to make sure that our community is being served the way intended. The Icky Club is so loved in Moonee Valley. It is a joyous place to be. Obviously, noting people in the audience tonight. And if something isn't going quite right, maybe we do need to help. It may not be intentionally not going right, but there obviously needs to be, I think, probably something going on. I don't want to jump to conclusions until we get this report back, and hopefully it comes back soon. Yes, the other thing that I would like to, no, actually I'll leave it at that, but I would like to say thank you to, as Councillor Sypek said, everyone that has brought this to our attention. I'm assuming you won't be speaking on this, Mayor, but I'm assuming to your attention as well. It's such an important place in Moonee Valley, the Icky Club, and we love to see it thriving, so let's get it back thriving.
Thank you, Councillor Byrne. Would any other councillor like to speak? If not, I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? And that's carried unanimously.
Thank you.
10.2, I'll call on Councillor Byrne to present her notice of motion titled Notice of Motion number 2023/30, intersection improvements at Keilor Road and Matthews Avenue, Niddrie.
Thanks, Mayor. I would like to move that Council resolves to write to the Department of Transport and Planning, the Minister for Roads and Road Safety, the Honourable Melissa Horne MP, and the Member for Niddrie, the Honourable Ben Carroll MP, seeking a review of the traffic signal timing and phasing at the intersection of Keilor Road and Matthews Avenue in Niddrie to improve safety for pedestrians using the crossing points closest to 374 Matthews Avenue, Niddrie.
Thank you, Councillor Byrne. Is there a seconder? Councillor Sypek. Councillor Byrne.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm just going to paint this picture for everyone in case it is a little bit confusing in terms of exactly where I'm talking about. If we're talking about Keilor Road, I'll talk about coming from the Essendon direction, and I'll talk about it going to the Keilor East direction. Going from the Essendon direction towards the Keilor East directions, there's 2 lanes of traffic, and from the Keilor East direction towards the Essendon direction, there is also 2 lanes of traffic. When you get to the intersection of Matthews Avenue and Keilor Road, there is a tram that does turn around there, but to the side of the tram there is a pedestrian crossing which is closest to 374 Matthews Avenue. One of the issues that we have at this intersection, because it is a very busy road, that often the line of traffic that is closest to the library in the direction of Keilor East going towards Essendon can often bank back, and the line of traffic that is closest to the Airport West side coming from the Essendon to Keilor East side quite often want to do a right-hand turn going down Matthews Avenue. I hope that everyone is following me. I understand this is a very complicated intersection to try to describe. Now, what happens when these cars get a green light? We'll often sit there and wait. The traffic that is banked up will stay there, and there will be a few cars that are still coming down the left-hand side coming from Keilor East to Essendon, and eventually they do dwindle out. People peer over their steering wheel and they put their foot down, legally, I'm sure, and do a right-hand turn. However, within that time, often the green pedestrian light can go. Now, normally people would keep an eye out for this pedestrian crossing and light, but because there is an unusual wait that occurs, because there is so much traffic that's going on, there has been many near misses, and my understanding is that there have been pedestrians hit at this particular spot. Now, I'm not saying that this particular intersection is at the same level of the intersections that we've been advocating very strongly for in terms of what's going on up in North Essendon, but I'm also aware that that is an extremely expensive intersection to fix up at North Essendon, whereas this one is with me not being an engineer, it looks like if a red turning arrow was put in place for when the green pedestrian light was on, it would potentially alleviate a lot of the stresses that are currently being caused in this particular position. I want to make sure that this council is doing everything we can to advocate to the right people to ensure that this can get looked at. There are people who are well versed in this that I'm sure when they see what is going on can make a very cheap, very good fix to this and hopefully just relieve some of the stresses that people have when there is, unfortunately, cars that get very close to pedestrians on this particular crossing. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Byrne. Councillor Sypek, would you like to speak?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I concur everything with what my colleague says, and it's good to see that Mr. Ben Carroll's office is just right around, right on the corner there. He could just walk out of his front office and have a look at this, and I think Councillor Byrne and myself would be more, and yourself, Mr. Mayor, be more than happy to meet him to show him what the issues are there, and he can then relay those things to help get this over the line. Look, I think this is a very good issue that you brought up, Councillor Byrne, and I look forward to seeing this come to fruition.
Thank you, Councillor Sypek. Would any other councillor like to speak? If not, I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? And that's carried unanimously. Item 11 on the agenda is urgent business. Councillors, do we have any urgent business? If not, we move on to 12 confidential reports, and we have one confidential report listed on the agenda tonight. Councillors, I need a mover and seconder that council resolves to close the meeting to the public pursuant to section 66(2) of the Local Government Act 2020 to discuss the item 12.1, appointment of an independent member to the Audit and Risk Committee, as it is considered confidential under the terms of section 3.1. F, personal information being information which, if released, would result in the unreasonable disclosure of the information about any person or their personal affairs, as it contains confidential personal information. Moved, Councillor Bedio, seconded Councillor Sypek. I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? And that's carried unanimously. So this is where we say good night to our members of the public who have joined us both in the gallery and via live stream. I'll close the meeting to the public at 9:01 p.m. Thanks for joining us. See you next time.